Right, month one of retirement, done. Was it the dream? Did I instantly become the Zen master living on a beach? Not exactly. It's been amazing, been weird, stressful, and freeing all at the same time. A cornucopia, if you like, of all those feelings. And today, I'm going to be sharing the unfiltered highlights and the hurdles of my first 30 days of retirement. Top 10 if you like. So let's go. Before I dive into this top 10, some of which will be surprising, I think you'll find, so stay around for that. Can I just ask that on my last video, 82% of you weren't subscribed. So it would be a real help to me if you could hit that subscribe button, toggle that notification bell. It will really help me. And in return, I'll do my best to make videos like this that are more relevant to you and better and all of that. So yeah, if you can help me out, I'll try and make things better on the channel. Anyway, back to the top 10. So yeah, number one, the instant relief. Oh my God. I think I mentioned in my sort of first week video, that feeling of instant sort of stress relief, that idea that I'm not thinking about work in the background. You can never eradicate all stress from your life. Whatever situation you're in, there's always going to be elements of stress. Actually, you know, there's some benefits to having a little bit of stress in your life. Don't know what they are, but apparently there are. But the point is, you can't live a totally stress-free life unless you're some sort of kind of Buddhist monk. Then you're probably stressing that you haven't done enough prayers or something like that. But one of the biggest stresses in life is work. It's the big one because we spend most of our time doing it. So it's always there like a big black cloud on the horizon. You know, we go off and do something else, but at the back of our mind, it's always a thought that there's work. Whether you enjoy your work or not, there's still an element of, oh my God, you know, I've talked about that Sunday evening blues feeling. Oh my God, I've got work, you know, tomorrow. Or there may be occasionally there's a big problem at work and you know you've got to confront it. Not having that around. Like today is a beautiful day behind me, you can see, and there are a few clouds in the sky. But work is like that big black grey cloud that's always there. Without it, the skies seem a bit clearer. I can live with a few fluffy white clouds, yeah? So I can live with a few bits of fluffy white stress now and then. But not having work, not having to think about work is perhaps the biggest thing. I mentioned how the first week it felt like I was walking on air. That feeling's still here. 30 days later, I still feel like that. If anything, it's slightly better because for the first few days, I still kept having a kind of almost like a kind of reflex thing of thinking, oh, I have to check my emails, and then remembering, no, I don't. You know, I've left work. Yeah, I thought that would linger around for a few more weeks or whatever, but no, I have really moved on. Having said that, time has flown by, it's rushed by, but at the same time, work does feel like another country, way, way in the distance. Thoughts and feelings towards work feel like it was another lifetime, even though the last 30 days really have rushed through. And I kind of thought, what have I done with the last 30 days? But again, doesn't really matter what I've done with my last 30 days because I got plenty of time to do stuff I thought I was going to do. So that was one of the things, actually, not only, you know, the release of stress and had plans to do all these different types of things. A lot of things I didn't do in the end, but I'm not stressing about that because it's not as though there's a deadline on these things and I've got the time to do it. So yeah, that feeling of a major cause of stress, however big or small, perhaps one of the biggest causes of stress in your life because it occupies a large chunk of your life is just not there. In my case, it just makes me more of a chill person. Yeah, I still have stresses, but when you have less stress, it means that you can handle those stresses more comfortably. The reason we get stress is because the stress builds up. You know, when I say stress, like little problems or issues, if you're just dealing with small little problems one at a time, you know, that's fine. Stress starts evolving when they're coming at you thick and fast, or they're coming at you in different sizes of stress. Not having work, taking that out, really frees you up to be able to deal with everything else. That feeling of a weight lifted off of my shoulders, of feeling a bit lighter in sort of my mind and spirit. Still there, mate. Still there. Number two, Unlearning, oh, a little fish jumped out there. So yeah, this is about habits. When you work most of your life, or you go to school and then you work, and it's that 9 to 5 structure. I've talked about it before on these videos, that 9 to 5 structure. When that becomes your life, you're almost on sort of automatic. You know, it almost becomes like a reflex that you structure your life around that 9 to 5. It's so ingrained, it's quite difficult to shake it off. You know, it's weird that I still do things, you know, like for instance, I still go for a walk at 1 o'clock because it's lunchtime, because that's what I used to do when I was working from home. I'd go, oh, 1 o'clock lunchtime, I'll go for a walk. And yet I still do that now and then when I kind of forget, well, why am I doing that? You know, Mad Dogs and Englishmen and all that, you know, beautiful day. Why am I going for a walk at 1 o'clock? I could go any time of the day, because I'm free to do that. So it's just little things like that. I still have an element of structure to my life because my son is with me for half the week. I take him to school for, you know, for 3 days, 2.5 days, 3 days, pick him up from school. So there's still that structure that I used to have. So it's not as though I've sort of just stepped off the corporate 9 to 5 with a kind of a sudden stop. It's been a sort of transition to it, but it's still the habits of the 9 to 5, you know, are still there. And as I say, getting used to not having to kind of structure your life around it. You know, even like simple things like, you know, because we tend to watch TV or watch a movie in the evening, because of the structure of our lives, you know, 9 to 5, finish our job, maybe have something to eat, sit down, watch the telly, watch a movie or whatever. Those tend to be evening activities. It almost seems weird, if it's not the weekend, watching a movie during the middle of the day. It sort of seems a bit odd. But just shake off that Monday to Friday feeling. You know, so I still find myself settling down in the evening to watch, you know, something on TV or a movie, because that's traditional time when you watched it. Why can't I just watch it during the day? I mean, right now, I mean, what a time to retire in this country right now from a weather point of view. Spring has blessed us. Winter was absolutely dire and miserable and grey. It wasn't like cold or anything, it was just wet and grey every day for about 90 days. Greyer than I've ever known a winter. Quick tip, retire in the spring. You know, if it's not for the tax year starting in April, do it for the weather. You know, I'm not watching movies during the day at the moment because the weather's so amazing. But come winter, that's going to be very interesting what I do with my time, because obviously I can't go out so much and stuff like that during winter. So will I be watching movies more during the day, during the winter, or when the weather's a bit more miserable? Probably. Back in the day, when you had TV schedules, you know, that's the reason TV schedules were scheduled in that way. Now we have Netflix and streaming. Scheduling is dead. Sorry to say it to my former colleagues. Let's be real. Scheduling is dead, unless it's for live events. So yeah, trying to unlearn those 9 to 5 structures. It's all right. Yeah, trying to unlearn those 9 to 5 structures is quite difficult. I read a book by Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, and he says about trying to stop habits is really difficult. Don't try to stop habits or break habits. What you need to do is adapt habits. So change something in that habit for the positive, because habits are really hard to break. I mean, habits are a good thing. You know, I talked about making exercise a habit so that then it becomes automatic, because it's hard to break. Once something becomes a habit, it's hard to break. That's the good use of a habit. Breaking a habit or changing a habit, what you need to do is adapt a habit. Maybe some habits do need a hard, cold snap. I don't know. But we'll see. Breaking free of that 9 to 5. My weekly structure is still there to a certain degree because I have a kid who goes to school for half the week. I mean, he doesn't go to school for half the week, but I take him to school for half the week. There's that sort of structure there that I still have to live by. But when he's not around, the first few days of the week, yeah, I'm structure free. And so that's a good balance, really. There are some elements that you need to put in, I think. As I said, I've started going on, for a big shop. I'm trying to economize, and one way of doing that is just go for one big shop rather than lots of little shops and then seeing things and going, oh, that'd be nice, oh, that'd be nice. Just do that once. We'll see how that turns out. But there we go, yeah. Freeing yourself from the 9 to 5 structure that's so ingrained in our lives, which I guess leads to finding a new rhythm. Once you don't have that structure, for some people, especially if it's a cold, hard stop. As I said, just jumping off the 9 to 5 train, instantly stop. And you can understand why some people, especially when they're a little bit older, when they retire, whoop, he's trying to give me the frights on this canal path today. But yeah, finding a new rhythm in life, that takes a little bit of a while getting used to it. As I said, what I used to do is used to get up in the morning, I used to exercise. Maybe I'd do a shortened piece of exercise because I'm conscious that I've got to start work. Then I have breakfast, and then I get on with work. And I'd be cramming it in, trying to cram that in quickly and then get to work. And then I thought, well, I want to make a video. So yeah, I'll do that at lunchtime. I'll squeeze it in, or a little bit in the evening. I'll squeeze it in then, or if I have a break during work, can I make a little bit of a video, or do a bit of editing? I'm squeezing it in. I'm time pressurized. Whereas now, of course, no, I'm not time pressurized. And that change of not being time pressurized, that change in the rhythm of your life takes a little to adapt to. And I'm doing it. But what I find is because you're not time constrained, as it were, you can put more time into these things. So I can spend a little bit longer doing the exercise, which overall is beneficial to me. Or I can take slightly longer having my breakfast, chilling out, not feeling I've got to rush it or anything like that. Take my time, enjoy it, savor, be in the moment, all of that. There's no rush. I'm allowed to take my time on this. And if I feel like I put a lot of work in one day making a video or something, then you know what? I can just go into the garden. I can just sit there for half an hour with a cup of tea, 20 minutes, doing nothing, chilling whenever I want. Or, the next day go, well, I'm not going to make any videos. Just going to have a nothing day. I've got the options and the choice and the rhythm, that slowing down the rhythm of your life. You don't have to rush everything. You don't have to cram everything in and all of that. That's what I'm talking about. We've got something very interesting coming up, so keep watching here. Something very interesting on the canal path coming up. Number 4, rediscovering passions and relaxation. I just want to show you something very briefly now. Anyway, yeah, finding your passions. I love making, videos. And while I was working, I had to sort of fit them in, getting the videos done because I wanted to do them. I enjoy doing them, but sometimes they're stressful because, I have limited time and, people want my time. I've got work, all those kind of things. Whereas now, as I mentioned, I can really indulge in those passions of making videos and stuff like that. I've got the time. And I'm sort of rediscovering my love of it and sort of taking more time on some of these videos and editing. I want to, travel a bit more. And, initially I'm thinking, well, I can't really go on any kind of major big travels because obviously I've still got to look after my son. But travel doesn't have to be a big, long session to fly out to Vietnam or something like that. It could be a short break. My sister lives in France. It cost me about, 70 quid there and back on EasyJet or Ryanair. Pop out, see her for 3-4 days, come back. Pick up my son. Let me know. If I do go to France, which I'm planning, I think I've been bitten on the leg, so I'm just itching as the train goes by. As the countryside has its ups and downs. Having time to rediscover those passions. And at the same time, there are things I wanted to do. It's that balance between, as I said, just, deciding to do things on a whim and sort of planning a few things to make the most of your time because you've got the time to do it, like quick travel to, I fancy going to Faro in Portugal or whatever because I've never been to Portugal. Quick trip out there, few days, experience it. Why not? I want to venture forth from this beautiful village that I'm living in, you know what I mean? And get out a bit more, have more of an adventure, even if they're little mini adventures. For, later in life, it may kind of, when I plan to maybe go for longer periods of time once my son is at university, maybe this is sort of be a good training period to get used to having little visits in Europe. And it's not that much, it's not that expensive. Why not? So yeah, it's about just rediscovering those passions that you had. I've mentioned it before, and the relaxation and just the space that you have with which to enjoy those things. Again, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but there's something very satisfying about rediscovering and having the space and the energy, as it were, because it gives you energy. The relaxation gives you the energy to enjoy your passions. People enjoy their passions when they're working because it's sort of a relief from work and all of that. And they cram it in at the weekend or whatever. I think, whatever it is, if you're going, cycling or doing what it is, and that's your way of relaxing. When you kind of can relax 99% of the time, you can use that relaxation to energize you to put into those passions, a little bit more, things that take a little bit longer and stuff like that. So yeah, relaxation and rediscovering passions. Number 5, shifting social dynamics, i.e. your mates. I must admit, because I work from home a lot, we remember in the office, at least twice a week. Make that for me twice a quarter, whatever. I mean, I hardly went in. To be honest, I did take the pee a bit. Nobody seemed to mind, as I've mentioned before. My line manager worked in Glasgow anyway, so them was my excuses. Doesn't matter now because I've left. But the point is, when I was at work, I maybe had 1 or 2 close friends, I'd say, sort of close work colleagues, that I might be tempted to go out for a drink with after work. There's one I used to, go for a burger with every so often. But when you're working from home, you sort of lose that. That social connection I did have at work had kind of reduced anyway, and partly because of the pandemic and being in the house a lot of the time. So there is a kind of an interesting change in that social dynamic, but it's not just with obviously your work colleagues and stuff like that. It could be with your friends as well. You may have gone out with in the evening or at the weekends because they're working. Or for example, if you're in a relationship, your partner, they may be working Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. They may want to go out on a Friday night or, at the weekend when you're thinking, I'd rather not go out at the weekend. I much prefer going out during the week when it's quieter. But of course, they can't. And actually, that's one of the things I kind of realized takes a little kind of getting used to, but you adapt. Maybe you make the effort and go and see them while they're working or something like that if they work from home, which I try to do. But that is an interesting dynamic. And people have said to me, oh, you should volunteer and stuff like that. And I've mentioned, make new connections. And many kind of psychological experts saying that social connections are really important for your mental health. And I'll be honest, I have very few social connections. I'm not sure it's impacted my mental health. I feel pretty chill, pretty relaxed. I've got my family. I have a really good relationship with my son, really good relationship with my daughter, good relationship with my partner. Well, that's my mini tribe. I'm not one of these people that says, oh, don't believe the experts. No, do believe the experts. They've studied a lot longer than you have, so they might be right. So there may be something in this social connection. Interestingly enough, somebody who watches my video who lives locally recognized me and reached out to me and said, look, your videos are resonating with me. We should go for a drink. And I just thought, there we go, Clive. Practice what you preach. There is an opportunity to build a social connection. Now is an opportunity to sort of drift away from falling into what may be a bad habit of not having that social connection and start building up those social connections. I'm using this opportunity and the change in the social dynamics to sort of be proactive and start, being a bit more sociable. You boring old fart, Clive. Anyway, so that's another thing I've kind of realized and I've vouched to do. Okay, the financial slowdown. This has been one of the more stressful things, really. I mentioned in another video how a week before my pension is due, I get a note from the pension company saying, oh, the pension quote we gave you is all wrong, so you have to fill out all the forms again. And I'm thinking, yeah, but it's due the 1st of May. Oh, yeah, we'll try and rush it through. I had to ring them up in the end. Somebody on one of my comments said, stop being so British and waiting. Ring them up and complain. So I did. And they said, okay, yeah, we'll sort it out in the next few days for you. But the other thing is, I'd planned, my budget. In order to make this work, I have to reduce my lifestyle, live within my means, cut out some extraneous costs. Do I need all those subscriptions? All of that. Do I need to spend all that much money on food and stuff like that? Cut it out. So I budgeted to kind of look at how I can make this work. Well, I've had a month of that now, and it's surprising how many costs you realise you've been paying all this time and that you hadn't noticed before. Even though I'd went through my bank account for the whole last month to try and judge whether I was there or thereabouts, I kind of realised that I seriously underestimated costs like petrol. I put something like 50 quid. I don't go anywhere in my car. That'll be enough. No. Suddenly it's like, Dad, will you take me to football? Which is like 30 miles away or something. Or, go and help my partner who lives in London. So that's like a 2-hour drive or whatever. Yeah, even though I just think all I'm doing is taking my son to school 3 days a week, how come I'm using that much petrol? But yeah, you'll be surprised. You literally burn through the petrol like nobody's business. So that price had to go up. As I said, I'm trying to do a big shop once a week, and I go to Aldi now because it's significantly cheaper and I get everything I want. Because what you find is if you do what I used to do, is just, oh, we need some food, pop out, get some food. Oh, we need some food, pop out, get some food. You always grab the stuff that they're trying to blast at you. And it's changing those kind of habits. I'm trying to cook for myself a bit more in terms of not have some ready-made meals. When I say ready meal, I don't mean like cheap, nasty stuff. I had this stuff called stocked, which I highly recommend if you can afford it, which is basically frozen blocks of sauce, like curries or whatever, all made with fresh ingredients. I used to order it, gets delivered, and then you just grab a couple of blocks, stick it in the microwave, and then you add it to rice or your noodles or your pasta, whatever the sauce is. And it's all freshly made and stuff like that, but it's just a lifesaver in terms of time and effort. But it is a little bit expensive. You know, it's like one of these Hello Fresh things. Oh, I shouldn't slag them off. They might offer to sponsor my videos. But you know what I mean? If you can afford it, great. But when you're trying to cut corners, you realize, actually, I can do my own batch cooking. But it's not just that. There's costs that come out of the blue that you just weren't expecting. You know, my son's sacred gaming computer, his gaming PC, crashed on him and he was like, Dad, what am I going to do? And I tried everything to fix it. I looked online. My IT knowledge is okay, but limited. Took it to get repaired and that ended up costing, 160 quid. Oh yeah, I wasn't expecting that. Well, my daughter's at university and, university's being super tight-arsed at the moment. She's got to do an exhibition. Well, guess what? She's got to pay for it. She doesn't have the money in her student loan or whatever to pay for doing her own exhibition for her own course. That's something the sort of course should do, but no. So that's kind of the bank of mum and dad, Dad, please can you help me out? And I'm not going to say no, of course. I want her to do well in her degree and stuff like that. She's got to do a photo book. That's going to cost like 100 quid to have professionally done. She's got to do one of those as part of the course. So it's things like that you just, you suddenly think, damn, I haven't factored in. And I keep having to go back to my planned budget. And there are some costs which are fixed. I can't change. So where's the flex? Could I reduce my food bill by 20 quid here? Maybe knock down my entertainment bill by 20 quid here and stuff like that. It's making those adjustments. Going from not really thinking about what I was paying for because I was being paid okay. Now I sort of seriously, microscopically analyze my ins and outs. I realized that you can't just go from, 200 miles an hour to 60 like that, You need to adjust. You can't just go from one lifestyle to another instantly. It's going to take a bit of time to evolve. And, money is always stressful. Not having the second pension fully sorted is a little bit stressful. It's going to end up costing me a little bit more money because I have to pay an extra mortgage payment I hadn't expected to pay because I was hoping to have that wiped out. Until that's all sorted, and it's not sorted 1 month after, I left work, until it's 100% sorted, that causes a lot of anxiety for me still. Not a lot. Relative. I'm talking relative, but it's one of the most anxiety-inducing things in my life at the moment, which I said is relative anyway. So yeah, there you go. The other thing I'm getting used to is just the sheer emotional mix, the sheer elation of a stress-free life that I mentioned before, mixed with moments of, as I said, little bits of anxiety, usually around finance. So it's just like annoying things like that sort of cut into that feeling of sort of mild ecstasy that I seem to be living with most of the time. As I said earlier, right at the beginning, you can't eradicate all stress. And our lives need a little bit of stress. I guess it releases some chemicals that are useful. It's just when the stress gets too much, when it becomes a problem. But it's sort of adapting to the sort of the highs and lows. I want to kind of be in a Zen state most of the time if I can. And most of the time I found I have been in that. But as I said, other people's problem shared is a problem halved. Great. I get that and I appreciate that. People close to you have problems and they want to share them with you. You take on a little bit of that stress, which is fine. I've got the capacity to do that and stuff like that. But it takes a little bit of getting used to from being on a sort of a Zen-like high to then having to deal with somebody else's problems, whether it's your kids or your partner or whatever. They all have their mini issues. As a dad, as a partner, you have a responsibility to help alleviate and listen to other people's problems. And when you're in like a Zen-like state of ecstasy or sort of, calmness. Number 8, where does the time go? As I said, it's been an absolute whirlwind. Yet work does seem like years ago. I'm going to sit in my garden. Yeah, you do think, where the hell has it all gone? And as I said, some days I'm doing stuff and I look up and I think, oh my God, it's nearly 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Being relaxed can take its time on you. It's amazing how, the day never drags. That's one of the biggest surprises for me. I thought, and other people said, what are you going to do all day? The day was all jag. And I kind of must admit, I think, okay, look, first week, honeymoon period, all of that. But I've never had a moment of boredom. That's not to say I've been busy and preoccupied all the time, but there's always something that you can be doing. And, sometimes I sit in the garden. I'm not a great gardener, I've said before, but if I see a weed, dandelion, hate them, get rid of that. Annoying dog barking there. Yeah, I think, I'll do that. Do that half an hour. Just spend 20 minutes, a little bit of weeding, relaxation. Not because I have to, but because I want to. There's always something that you go, I'll just do that. I'll just do this. And none of it feels forced. I've never been bored so far. As I said, we'll see what it's like in the winter. But yeah, right now, boredom is not an issue. Having said that, as I said, and I mentioned it earlier, freedom does require a little bit of planning. And I did have plans. And whilst I don't feel bad that I haven't done all those things that I'd planned to do in the first few weeks, because, as I said, got plenty of time to do them, I do realise that because time has flown by really quickly, I do need to actually plan some stuff. Like I said, I want to go to Europe. And yeah, it's going to take a little bit of planning for little trips because I've still got to be here for my son at the end of the week. So I've got to fit it in at the beginning of the week. And all those sort of things. It does require sitting down and planning in advance, something I'm not particularly brilliant at, I'll be honest, but I've got the time to do it and learn it, so that's what I'm going to do. So you do need to plan some things. As I said, I'm trying to structure a weekly shop. I've talked about not having too much structure, but there are some things. So like on a Wednesday, I'll go to Aldi and do the big shop and stuff like that. So a little bit of planning, a little bit of structure, trying to batch cook ahead of time. So cook some sauces up, some bolognese or some, katsu or something like that so that I can just have it through the week and I'm ready and I don't have to sort of prepare it. But number 10, finally, one of the biggest things, as I said, is just being able to do things on a whim. Despite everything I just said about planning, there are some things you can just do on a whim, like, you know what, I'm going to just jump in the car, sitting in the garden and then seeing some weeds and going, I'm going to deal with that right now. As I said, not because I have to, but because I can. So yeah, it's having that freedom to just be able to decide, you know what, I'm just going to jump in the car and go somewhere. Say Monday to Wednesday, it's like, whatever, do what I want. It takes a little bit getting used to, but it's a really, really massive benefit. Anyway, there you go, top 10. Bit of a rant, bit of a ramble, but I just wanted to share my kind of experience of my first 30 days of retirement. Am I still in the honeymoon period? Probably. Will winter be very different because we're being blessed with such beautiful weather? Probably. But right now, it's been amazing. And also just making these videos and connecting with people. As I said, the amount of comments I get on these videos really shows that these videos are resonating with people. And that's really good. It's nice to know that you're not alone or your thoughts are shared with other people in such a way and they're thinking the same things and thinking, oh my God, it's like you're inside my mind. I get comments like that going, that's exactly what I think. So that's really, really good as well. So thank you for everybody who's watched my videos. And if you like this video, then hit the likes because I like it. YouTube likes it. And it helps people like you find content just like this. And as I said, 82% of people who watch these videos aren't subscribed. Now's the time. Hit that subscribe button, toggle that notification bell, and that way you'll know when I upload videos just like this. And talking of videos just like this, why don't you watch these videos here? You see these ones here, yeah? Watch those. You'll love them. Thanks for watching.